Good afternoon and welcome to Dialogue with Deidre. I'm your host, Deidre Malone, and it's Women's History Month. I am so excited to have in the studio with me author Lora Chilton. Welcome to Dialogue with Deidre.
Thank you so much. Oh, what a thrill to be here after all these years of friendship.
We've known each other at least 30 years, and I've got to tell the story as I take my glasses off, Lora. Laura and I both are big supporters of education. And wouldn't you know, we ran for the same school board seat. And I lost to Laura. You've heard me talk about her before, that I lost to her. But you've also heard me say that, I lost to a really good person who cares about our children and fought so hard for our children. So, Laura, so proud of your public service. And thank you for representing us so well in District 5.
Thank you. Well, sometimes I like to say that the best thing that ever happened, in a way, for you was not having to serve on the school board, because your career just boomed and thrived, and it's amazing what you've done. So thank you, that was a bump that led you to bigger and better things.
Oh, Laura, thank you. It was funny because after that loss, Shep Wilbin, I'll never forget, he said, Deidre, you believe in education. Why don't you try and for a seat on the county commission? Mm-hmm. And I hadn't even thought about that. Right. So was able to help in that way. So absolutely. Things happen for a reason. Yes. But you were wonderful and you represented us so well. And I just want to thank you for your service. So now let me just talk about this book. 1666, a novel. I've started reading it and then got a little upset. First paragraph, first chapter. Yes. And so what made you decide to write 1666?
Well, I have ancestry in the Patawomeck tribe. And so in 2007, we had a Chilton family reunion, and Chief Two Eagles Green, who was the chief at the time, came to our reunion and told us about the oral tradition of the tribe. And that involved this massacre in July of 1666, where all the men were killed and the women and children sold into slavery in Barbados. And I had 1,000 questions for him. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I was like, where can I buy that book? I really want to know more about the women and the story about our tribe. And there was no book. But this is back in 2007. So then just for my own learning about my ancestors, I started reading everything I could and just investigating it, trying to do a deep dive just to understand what had happened. And then fast forward all these changes in life, and I'd always written op-eds, as you have, absolutely. And policy as you have. Yes. But I had an idea for a book. It wasn't this book, a historical fiction, which is my favorite genre. And so I wrote it, but that took like 10 years. And then I couldn't find a publisher for it.
And that was your first book?
Yes. My first fiction.
Fiction, okay, first fiction.
And so as I was trying to find somebody to publish it, I just really felt the story of these women needed to be told. And so while I was thinking about that, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to concentrate on this. So I started writing 1666 then to honor the women's story, their strength and their resilience, and the work of the tribe to preserve the story and the language and the culture.
And so what was that process like for you?
Well, so I'd started researching more just for myself, and acquired a lot of books. And then when I thought about trying to put this into story form, because I think historical fiction can bring history to life in a way that maybe just reading history doesn't. And so I started to form the story. So thinking about the women, and imagine one night where you lost your husband, your brother, your sons, your freedom, your village. And I was just like, how did they go on? And then you now are a slave. Right. You marched south to parts unknown, life unknown. How do you survive that? And what's your motivation?
Right.
And once they got to the island, how did they continue to live with the grief and the slavery? Was it revenge? Was it love?
Right.
Was it for their children? And so I just began to think about those things. And then I had sort of guiding principles that I wanted to honor, like using Native names,
Yes,
using some of the language to honor what was lost. And so that was sort of the process, and I just started writing.
well, and the resiliency of the
Yes.
two women
Yes.
is so important. So I don't want you to tell the whole story, because I still want people to go and buy the book. And the name of the tribe, say it, Laura, so I won't get it wrong. Is it Patawomeck?
Patawomeck.
Patawomeck. Like the
It looks
Potomac,
like Patawomeck, but it's Patawomeck.
Potomac.
And you're about to say like the
Yes.
the Potomac
Potomac
River.
River. Yes.
So the tribe had migrated south from sort of Canada, New York, and landed along the Potomac Creek and Potomac River. And that's where they had been living since the 1300s, peacefully, mostly, until this fateful night in 1666. I mean, there had been skirmishes with early explorers, and
Right.
and they had been a very peaceful tribe. It was noted in all the early writings of these early explorers that how they had gifted food and helped keep these people alive. And then, but the increasing pressure as these early explorers wanted land and wanted to take more and more, and pushing the Patawomeck and other native tribes in Virginia further west and out of their land.
The history, I tell you, and your dad. So this is your dad's history. So growing up, did you learn much?
We did not learn much. So my dad didn't reveal his native ancestry to his family. My mom knew.
Okay, your mom did.
Until 2006. So I was fully grown. And it was just at dinner one night. They lived in Virginia, and I'd gone back to see them. And at dinner one night, Daddy just very casually said, well, you know, my grandmother was an Indian, and then, you know, please pass the butter. And I was like, Dad, hold up. I've never heard this. And then the story unfolded, and he had just been told and had heard from, as a young child, don't tell anyone you're an Indian. And so when he went, and he remembers hearing it the first time, or the time that was, I guess, deeply embedded in his heart, was on the day he went to school. And he was told, your teachers may ask you if you're an Indian, and you must say no. And if you get called to the principal's office and they ask you if you're Indian, say no. And so the background and he said, so it was just considered a shameful secret. And the background is, so Daddy was born in 1935, and in 1924 in Virginia, there had been a very big eugenics movement, and they passed the Racial Integrity Act of 1924 that eliminated Native people from all census records, all marriage records. So at that time, in the terminology of that day, you were identified as white or colored.
Right.
And if you were Indian, you were to be identified as colored.
Really?
Yes. So because of the extreme racism against black people, many Native people, if they could pass, tried to.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you could only go to school through 8th grade. Voting was unheard of.
Right.
Owning land was difficult. And so Native people just went underground. And so that's tough.
That's tough, especially since this is your country. Right?
Yeah. And the lost language, the lost culture,
right.
because basically it became illegal to be Indian or Native in Virginia at that time.
Well, you know, I don't know if you're a big fan of 1923. Have you ever watched that?
I haven't watched it yet. It's on my list.
Well, I'm a fan, and so and it takes me back to some of what was happening then. A couple, a white male and a Native woman married, and it was illegal.
Yes.
It's just amazing.
Well, what's even more shocking is that law wasn't repealed until 1968.
Oh, yeah.
So
And we were born.
This is our lifetime.
I know.
I mean, this isn't some piece of ancient history. This is, we were in elementary school.
Exactly. And so I can't even imagine the pressure your dad was under as a young kid to have to hide his history for fear of what could potentially happen to him.
Right.
It's so sad. But let's talk back about the book and the two women. And I don't want to give the whole story away because I really do want people to buy the book. Tell me a little bit more about what happens when they get to Barbados.
Okay. So, as an author, and because these are my ancestors,
yes.
I had this temptation of them getting to Barbados, and the nicest man on Barbados bought him a first-class ticket and sent him home and said, no, we're not going to do this.
Exactly.
But the actual history is just so brutal. The slavery that happened there in the, they were called the killing sugar fields of the Caribbean. And so, I always thought of that term, the killing fields, as modern with Cambodia and Laos.
Yes.
But that term was coined in the sugar fields. And it was just this death of North and South American Native people and Africans, just a constant influx of slaves to work in the sugar fields. So it would have been unrealistic to have them sold to the same plantation. Yeah. So at that point, their paths diverge. And so at the beginning, we're mostly hearing from Osaway, Wadapa, and Tom, Golden Fawn. And then she's recounting their friendship and their life through the massacre and as they were marched south and on the slave ship. But then we began to hear from Napawe Show because their experiences are so different.
Yeah.
And so Osaway is bought by a Quaker family, and it was unknown to me at the time that Quakers actually did have slaves at that moment in time in Barbados. So they were still fine-tuning their thoughts. They were escaping persecution in England and landed in Barbados for a minute and did have slaves and had sugar plantations. And then Napawe Show was bought by a very horrible, basically evil man who mistreated her and all his slaves. And so I do say that I don't call it a trigger warning in the beginning, but in the preface say that the book does deal with difficult subjects and sexual assault and murder and slavery, things that are difficult to read. But these are all things that happened.
Absolutely.
So none of this, while I've given the characters' names and imagined their conversations, the scenarios are all recorded in history. Yeah. So it was tough to think of them, put them to know what they would have to go through and what kind of resilience they had to have to escape that.
What do you hope people, when they read 1666, a novel, get from the story?
Well, to me, I would like people to know that 1666, a novel, is much like other forgotten stories that we have just learned. So I'm very embarrassed that I had never heard about the burning of Black Wall Street in Tulsa.
Yes.
Until 2020, with the HBO series The Watchmen.
Yes.
And it was just shocking. How did I not know about this? And then we get up to 2023 and we hear about the atrocities committed against the Osage in Oklahoma. And this is what that is. It's another forgotten story. And it's a hard story, but I believe deeply that if we are able to sit with these hard stories, our history, compassionately, and think about and embrace the concept of generational trauma, not just for the ones who received the abuse, but for the perpetrators, the generational trauma that they carry forward, we can be better people if we can sit compassionately with our hard history. And that's my hope. And also just to be an encouragement to anyone, but especially to women, as you go through hard times and changes that seem just unlivable, you can do it. And that you look at what somebody else has walked through and get strength from that.
I tell you, and I've only read the first chapter, but just to think about what the two women went through in their lifetime and the resilience it must have been, because I think they ended up back in this country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the oral tradition told that 2 or 3 women made it back. Yeah. And it seems, from my research, it seemed that probably 100 women and children were sold. Yeah. And they were always looking for somebody else to come back. So they never gave up hope. But all the tribe knows is that there were the 2 or the 3. And the book does answer the question, was it 2 or was it 3?
I love it. I love it. So, Lora, what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about becoming a writer?
I think if you have it in your heart to become a writer, you just need to sit down and write. And that's the first step. Yeah. You just have to sit down and write. And even if it never gets published, it's still very satisfying to find words and the process to think about how to express your character's thought, and what they were living, what they looked like, what their clothes felt like, what they ate, what their love life was like, what were their children like. And I mean, that's me, because historical fiction, that's what I love so much. But I think you just have to sit down and put pen to paper, or fingers to computer keyboard and go. But I do tell the story when I have given book talks that I'd heard about an airplane attendant and a flight attendant, mm-hmm. and she had written a book. It was fiction, but about flights and her experiences, and turned it into a fictional work. And she sent it out 47 times, 47 no's.
Oh no!
And on the 48th. Got a contract. So when I was finished with 1660, or when it was ready to go out, or I felt it was ready, I said to myself, don't get discouraged until you send it out 48 times. And then when I got to 48, Deidre, I said, why would you stop now?
Right.
And so on my 58th attempt, I connected with Sibylline Press. So all that to say is hang tough.
Yeah.
If you're writing or whatever you're doing, be encouraged.
And perseverance pays off. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. A young lady who used to work for me, Lora, her name is Latrivia Welch. Mm-hmm. She's written about 14 novels. It's fiction. It's mm-hmm. fiction, but it's around interracial marriage. Mm-hmm. And she's a USA Today, I guess, noted writer. Mm-hmm. But she loves it. She can just sit down. And I said, I don't know how you do it. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you do the research, and we research in our field, but to be able to research and then put real life to your characters. Mm-hmm. They have to have individual, their own lives. Mm-hmm. It's amazing that you can think through that and do it.
It's fun. It's hard, but I do love the thought process, and I just love the research. And people have said, "Isn't that just so hard and so laborious?" I love it. I love digging down and finding a little morsel, here or there, and things that I would find in the research that then I knew I had to incorporate into the story. And so on the cover, for example, and I won't give any spoilers, but. So this thin green snake, and this is Ossaway, in her ear piercing. And so I developed that after I read that one of the early explorers wrote something to the effect of, they came upon the Patawomeck leadership, and the spokesman had a thin green snake in his ear.
Oh, my.
And it said, he wrote, it appeared ye serpent was kissing ye savage.
Oh,
and I mean, those are their words.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, it was a tradition within our tribe when they were going to negotiate to put a thin green snake through the lead negotiator's ear. And of course, the snake is trying to get out. So he sees your ear canal and thinks it's a cave and tries to go in. Mm-hmm. It was interpreted by the ones they were negotiating with that the snake was whispering advice to the Patawomeck leadership, giving unfair advantage. And I just loved it. So I incorporated it in another way into the story that I think it has resonated with readers. But it was those kind of little tidbits that when I'd read them, I was just like, oh, my goodness, that has to be in the book.
I love it.
Somehow, some way.
I'm hoping people go out. I've gotten mine, and while Laura's here, she's going to autograph my book. So you can find this at your local bookstores. Will actually order it for you if it's not in stock, but on Amazon and some other places where they can get the book, right,
Yes,
Laura?
absolutely. It's available wherever you buy books, but locally, Burks and Novel have it in stock, and they have restocked it, and
I love it. I love it. Well, let me just say that, I took the easy way out from my ancestry and went to ancestry.com and did my little DNA test. And, a lot of African Americans think that they have a lot of Native American, and we don't.
Well,
I may have 2%. I think I have 2%.
Yeah.
But a lot of, we'll say it. And we'll say that it came down from our ancestors, that, our great grandmother was Native or something. But when you do the test, it's not a large percentage. At least it wasn't for my family.
Well, and just as a word to the wise or inquiring minds who feel like they have Native ancestry, if your Native ancestry came from the East Coast tribes, a lot of that is not documented through Ancestry.com and 23andMe. So you can't, if your family tradition holds that you have Native ancestry, you probably do, and it's just not showing up on those tests.
See, now that's good to know.
Yes, and there are ways to dig deeper. Of course, it costs a lot more money.
Yeah.
But there are databases that have traced Native ancestry specifically for people to discover what tribe or what area.
That's good to know.
Yes.
Like, what are some of those data? Do you remember some of those databases, Laura?
I can't.
That's okay.
Think of that on the
email
top of my head,
me,
but I will
I'll
email
put it on,
you.
And we'll make sure we put it in the story.
Yeah. So there are some other databases that you can search for Native ancestry, and so I tell people that it has been dismissed, oral traditions within families for whatever reason. But that's not fair.
Right.
And it's not really right. And I think we all should be allowed to embrace our ancestry, good and bad.
Because we've heard it. I mean, we've heard it coming down through the, and then when I did the test, I was like, well, So that's good to know. Yeah. And so now I'm going to do some more research. So were you really surprised, though, to learn about your history?
For some reason, I didn't feel shocked. I mean, the way Daddy told, first said it, it was just like, Dad. I remember being in 4th grade and having a history project, and you said we were mostly English and Scottish. But I feel like at the time, even there must have been some hesitancy in the way he told us that I remember him saying, mostly, and hedging his bets a little bit. And then there would be things he would say about his grandmother that weren't fully expressed. Like he talked about her making corn cakes with her hands on the on their iron griddle, and didn't relate it to his Native ancestry, but clearly it was. And that was a part of a tradition that had been passed down. And all these things were more fully discussed once he told us, and then the whole family embraced it and wanted to know more, and all the cousins, and it was a wonderful thing to discover.
So did you have a book reading for your family?
Yes. So I sent it out to the tribal leadership.
Wonderful.
And of course my family, wanting them to feel comfortable with it, or if they had concerns, and especially with tribal leadership, I wanted them to know that my heart was in the right place.
Absolutely.
I was trying to tell the story of our ancestors, but there is so much. There are so many attempts at monetizing, say, a story or a history, and I think at first maybe there was a little bit of, what is she all about? Do we really, or what is she trying to do? But then they read it, the tribal historians read it, and I kicked off the book tour at the Tribal Center in Fredericksburg.
Wonderful.
And it was really sweet. All the living chiefs came, and the tribal historians and other leadership were there, and it was great.
Oh my goodness. I can't wait. I'm going to make sure that if there are pictures on social media that we add those photographs to this show. Last few questions I want to ask you. I want to always ask something so people can really get to know you.
Okay.
What's your favorite musical group, Lora?
Oh, my favorite musical group. I was, this is so funny, but I recently did a podcast, and at the end he did a similar thing, he said, "What was your first concert?" and my first concert, I was Andre Crouch and the Disciples.
Oh,
Do you know
really?
that band?
Yes.
I was living in Maryland, I was a senior in high school, and so I can't say he's of course he's deceased, but I still like to listen to him, and I still listen to that on my playlist. This morning I was so as a part of writing the book, I had to create a playlist. The publisher wanted a playlist. Of course, we don't have recorded music from 1666, but I have a song in there by Rihanna because she's from Barbados.
Yes.
So I kind of on my playlist did a nod to indigenous singers like Redbone, and then Rihanna because she's from Barbados, and then Wayne Newton is in the tribe.
Is he?
So there's a Wayne Newton song.
Wow.
And then, of course, Al Green and Elvis.
Yes.
So I'm kind of
Got
all
that
over
the little Memphis.
all over the map with my favorite music.
Okay. Favorite food?
Favorite food? Oh, gosh, favorite food. I mean, I like a basic peanut butter and jelly sandwich or a grilled cheese, just comfort food.
I love it. I don't understand that because you're so thin, but I love it. And your favorite place to vacation?
Oh, the beach. That's an easy one. Warm water, warm sand. I love the beach.
Well, Lora Chilton, thank you so much for coming on Dialogue with Deidre. You are welcome to come back anytime because I know you're working on another book, I'm sure.
I am. So I'm working on a sequel.
Are you?
To 1666, and it'll take place, it's historical fiction, and it'll take place from 1898 to 1968, and it's going to be about the impact of the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. So it's going to look at the impact not just on Native people, but also on Black people in Virginia at that time, and the erasure of culture and language and just the extreme racism and segregation that happened. I mean, it was a eugenics movement, and it happened all up and down the East Coast. But I'm looking specifically at bringing to life that time in history and what it meant for families and people.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. And when you launch it, because you'll probably launch it in Virginia, let me know. I have my National Women's Political Caucus has a big Virginia caucus, and I'd love to have them come out and let them know about your new book and support.
That'd be awesome.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
Lora, thank you so much for coming on Dialogue with Deidre. Now, I'm going to ask my viewers to make sure you go out and get 1666, a novel. It's going to be a good read. I'm reading it now. And then after you watch the show, you get the book, please put comments on our YouTube page to let us know that you've read it. So thanks so much for watching Dialogue with Deidre. We'll see you next time.